A common pattern when you build mobile applications is to support drag actions on rows in a list control. So you can see here we have a UX component with a list control, and if I drag to the right, you can see that basically a action button is revealed, and if I stop dragging, then the button remains there until I click on it, and when I click on it, then the row is going to be changed from unread unread to read. So you can see now the icon has changed there. And then if I drag past a certain threshold value, then the action just gets invoked automatically without me having to click on the button. And similarly, if I drag to the right, here you can see that as I drag to the right, in this particular case we've defined 3 different actions. So if I stop dragging now, we get to see the 3 buttons. So if I tap on flag, you can see it says flag action on row 1. So this is row 0, that's row 1. And if I keep on dragging past the threshold distance, then the archive action is automatically invoked. So you can see there's archive. And if I drag and then release, if I don't drag by a certain amount, then it basically goes back to no action. So if I drag to the right and release, you can see there I've dragged past the threshold amount, so the button remains there. If I push it back now and just drag a little bit and release, you can see that it goes back. So this behavior you see a lot in native mobile apps, and creating a UX component in Alpha Anywhere to emulate this drag behavior on a row is really easy. So let's go take a look now at how this was all set up. So we'll go back now to our list control, and we can see that in the list control under list properties, there's a property here called has custom row drag behavior, and then if you check that checkbox, then you get this builder over here where you can define the actions. Now there's also a shortcut to get to this genie over here by just going here quick access, and then on the quick access menu you can go directly to the row drag settings. So anyway, so in the row drag settings here, you can see that I can specify whether there's a left to right drag action and also a right to left drag action. So you don't have to select both, you can select one or the other. And then you can go now and start defining the buttons that appear for a left to right and a right to left drag. So you'll see that the first property that we have here is the class name. So this class name action area is the class that is used to display the row background when you start dragging before the buttons are actually revealed. Then you can see this is the button size in pixels, so this is 70 pixels. And then you can see this here is how we specify that if you continue dragging after the button has been revealed, if you drag more than 30 pixels, then the action will be automatically invoked. So in the case where there's only one action on the row, it's obvious which action will be invoked. But in the case that we had here where there were 3 action buttons on the row, it's the outermost action that will be automatically invoked if you drag past the threshold distance. So the manner in which the action buttons can be defined can either be JavaScript or can be using a builder. So you can see here, if we go into the builder over here, we have our 3 buttons, more, flag, and archive, and each of the buttons has a CSS class that defines its appearance. And you can also define an inline style, and then finally for each button there's a named action, in this case more, flag, and archive, and these named actions are defined on the action tab in the builder. So let's pause now and pick this up in the next video. So we're continuing now to discuss how the action buttons are defined. So we're looking at the action buttons now for the right to left action, and here are the 3 buttons that have been defined in the builder. Now in the case of the left to right action, you'll recall that in that case the action changes the row from being read to unread, and therefore the label in the row needs to also change as well. So if we go here and look at the method for defining this action button, you can see that here we've chosen JavaScript, and here is the JavaScript function that returns the definition of the button. So your JavaScript function must return an array, and the array must contain a list of objects. Each object can have in it a property called HTML, another called class name, another called style, which we haven't used here, and another called action. So you can see here that inside this JavaScript function we can reference the data in the current row. So this is a pointer to the list itself, and index is the row number, zero-base row number that we're dragging on. So by doing this .get data index, we get the data for the current row, and we're saying that if the data for the current row, if data.read is true, then we want the button label to say unread. Otherwise we want the button label to say read, and then the action in both cases is going to be toggle read. So that's the definition of the buttons on the left drag action and the right drag action. And then if we go to the actions pane over here, we can see that for the more action, we're just basically just putting up an alert that says the more action was invoked, and you can see that we can reference index, which is the row number that the user was dragging on. Similarly for flag and archive, we're just putting up alerts. But in the case of the toggle read function, what we want to do is, first of all, we'd like to make sure that focus is set to the row that the user is dragging on. This is an optional feature here. You don't have to set focus to the row that the user drags on. And then we get the pointer to the data in the current row, and then we just basically toggle the value in the data read property, and then we update the row with that new data. So this is basically writing the new value of data.read back into the current row of the list control. So we're doing update row, and then the row number that we'd like to update is specified by index, and then the data that we'd like to update the row with is this data objects. So let's go back now and take a look at this again. So if we go now into working preview and we look at this first row, you can see now basically this indicates that this record has been read. So when we drag, the button says unread. If we tap that, you can see the icon now goes to unread, and now if we drag here, you can see the button says read, and if we drag past the threshold distance, the action is just automatically invoked. So what we've shown in this video is how easy it is to configure a list control to implement row drag behavior that you see in many native applications. Thanks very much for watching.